Hi, my name is Rachel, and I'm super excited today to tell you all about chicken farming and give you a tour of my chicken barn. Just like 97% of farms here in Manitoba, ours is family owned and operated. I am the third generation to work on our family grain farm and chicken farm. I currently work with my parents and my two brothers. So as you can see behind me, these two bins is where we store our chicken feed. So as you can see at the bottom, there is a pipe that goes from below the bins all the way into the barn. So we're really lucky here in Manitoba to be able to raise birds all year round. And one of the reasons why we're able to do that is because we raise them inside a barn. Now there's three major reasons why we're able to do that. One of them being temperature. As you can see, there's snow on the ground here and it's too cold for the birds to be outside. Inside the barn, it's nice and warm. A second reason why we're able to raise them indoors, why we raise them indoors, is for predators. Coyotes, wolves, foxes, all those kind of animals are predators to chickens. So keeping them in a barn keeps them safe from those animals. And the third reason why we keep them indoors is we want our birds to be healthy when we raise them. And so keeping them indoors, we can take measures such as biosecurity to prevent any disease from coming inside the barn. All right, now I want to take you inside to see my 3-day-old chicks. Come on in. Alright, so these are the controllers that pretty much run the entire barn. These controllers, with technology now, we are able to monitor way more things than we ever have been. So some of the things that we have on here is we have sensors throughout the entire barn that give us the temperature at all parts of the barn. So we always know that the barn temperature is consistent throughout the entire barn. These controllers also monitor humidity in the barn, how high it gets, how low it gets. We are able to lower the temperature automatically as the birds get older. The barn needs to be cooler, so these controllers can automatically bring those temperatures down. Another thing that's really great about these controllers is for lighting programs, we have dark periods overnight so that the birds have time to rest. So these controllers gradually bring the lighting down until it's dark, and then raise it back up when it's time for them to get up in the morning. And the great thing about these things is they can call our cell phones. If there's a problem, we're able to check the barn with this controller whenever we need to. So now we're gonna go into the barn, but first, the big important thing we gotta do is change our boots and sanitize our hands. All right, guys, you ready to go in? Here we go. Alright, as you can see, we are now inside the chicken barn, and it's nice and warm in here, and these are just one of the things I love. I love coming into the barn here and checking on the birds every day, multiple times. Growing up on the farm here, wasn't always a fan of working in the barn because it required me to go and do chores every single day. So grade 4 to grade 5, not always a fan, but as I grew up through junior high and through high school, I was learning to love it more and enjoyed it way more. And after grade 12, I actually took a year off because I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do with my career and my future, and so I worked full-time here on the farm. So I was working here in the chicken barns, but I was also working in the fields, driving tractor, and just doing a whole lot more stuff on the farm. And that caused me to actually decide to go to university at the U of M to the Ag Diploma program, and where I got my diploma in agriculture. So as you can see here now, I'm going to tell you more about what's going on here in the barn. So what we have here on the ground is bedding, and this bedding is actually wheat straw. Wheat straw that we harvested off of our fields, and it's pretty much the stalk of the wheat plant. So what happens is when we harvest it, the stalks of the plant get all chopped up, and we bale them and bring them here into the barn to use as bedding for the birds. It's a great bedding, the birds find it very comfortable, and they're able to act out their natural behaviors such as dust bathing and just peck around in the straw. So as you can see behind me, the chickens are able to run anywhere and everywhere throughout the barn. We call this free run. And so there's no cages in any Manitoba broiler farms or actually across the entire country. We're all cage-free for broiler chicken operations. Now, they have access to feed and water all the time because you can see that the water lines and the feeder lines go all the way to the back end of the barn. Now, I have right beside me, it's a little easier to see, these are the water lines, okay? So this is how the chickens get their water. And how it works is there's these little silver tabs underneath here. We call these water nipples. And what happens is when the chicken pecks at that silver silver nipple because it's shiny and chickens are curious little animals. They peck at that silver tap and it allows fresh water to come out of the tap. They stop pecking at it, the water stops. And what's great about these water systems is that they're all enclosed. So there's no debris, there's no dust or any bacteria that can get into the system. So they always are able to drink clean, fresh water all the time. Now the one right beside it here is the feed pans. Now what we have underneath the feed pans is chick paper. Now we put chick paper down when they're young because it attracts the chicks to where the feed is. Now when the chicks run on this paper, it makes noise and the chicks like the sound of that noise, so it attracts them to this. We also put extra feed on the paper so that they have nowhere to come for the feed. Now inside the feed pan here is where the feed actually is. And in this pipe right here is an auger. So an auger is pretty much a coil that turns and moves the feed through the pipe and puts it into every single feed pan. So a common question that we do get is, what do chickens eat? So here is a sample of what the birds actually eat. It is filled with grains, minerals, proteins, and vitamins to give them a healthy, nutritious diet. So a common misconception that we often do get is, are there hormones or steroids put inside the chicken feed? That is absolutely false. Since the 1960s, hormones and steroids have been illegal to be given to broiler chickens. So it's only good, nutritious feed that is given to our broilers. So these birds are currently 3 days old and they'll be ready for market in about 28 to 33 days. Now you may be wondering, well, that's pretty quick. Well, there's a number of reasons why they're able to grow so quickly. One, the genetic makeup of the bird. The second one is the feed, what I talked about before. Healthy, nutritious feed helps them grow quickly. And the last thing that helps them grow quickly is just us taking care of them and managing them and walking through the barns daily and multiple times to make sure everything is running really smoothly. Now, once they've hit their target weights or their markets, then they get taken out of the barn and then we're left with a dirty barn. Now, this bedding is then called litter or manure, what we call it. And the manure is then taken out with a tractor and we actually spread it on our fields, which is a great source of fertilizer. And that we can use for plant food for our grain crops. Now, once the manure is taken out of the barn, then we take a pressure washer, we wash the barn completely to make sure it's all clean of any organic matter or debris so that it's nice and clean for the next flock of chickens that come. Thanks so much for joining me on this tour of my chicken barn. I am super proud to be a part of an industry that can provide healthy local chicken for your family and for my family all year round.
Everyone, and I hope you enjoyed watching that video from Manitoba Chicken Producers. I want to welcome you to the question and answer portion of the Royal Farmyard this afternoon. My name is Angela Cairn. I'm the co-chair of Ag Education for the Provincial Exhibition of Manitoba, and I am joined by my co-chair, Mitchell Weasley. And we're really super excited to ask Rachel, who gave you the tour, some questions about what we saw in her virtual tour, and she's here to answer those questions for us. So, Mitchell, why don't you start with the first question?
Absolutely. So, Rachel, I guess going back to the start of your video where you're showing the 2 bins where you store the feed, how big are they in terms of measurement size, and how many days do those bins last before needing to be filled up?
So measurement size, I know how much can fit in them, so roughly they actually also range in size as well. So some of them could be like 8 tons, so 800 or 8,000 kgs can fit in a bin, and some of them go up to 16 tons, so 16,000 kgs as well. So measurement size, I want to say they go up like they're 20, 25 feet in height, so they're pretty big size bins, and they range in size as well, so some are smaller and some are bigger.
So in terms of when between fill-ups, how many days does that usually last you for?
So that ranges as well. So when they're younger, usually they don't, chickens don't eat as much when they're younger, right? As they get older, they will eat more and more. So, you know, and when they're younger, you only need to fill it up maybe, once every 2 weeks. But as they get older, they'll eat much more. So the more they eat, the more you have to fill it. So I would say, every 5-6 days, you got to fill the bin up for them so they have enough feed.
What temperature do you try and maintain throughout your barn facility?
So that again also ranges on age as well. So when they're young, they like it really warm. So I often describe it as when we first put them in the barn. So in the video, they were 3 days old. It was around about 32 degrees Celsius. So I say in wintertime, it's like going to Mexico. It's nice and warm in there. So yeah, for the first couple of days, it's really warm. It's around 32, 33 degrees Celsius. And as they get older, you need to cool it off. So by the end of the flock, when they're at their market target weight, it's around 23, 24 degrees Celsius, and also depends on the temperatures outside. If it's warmer outside, you need to ventilate more. And if it's cooler, then you got to take into consideration outside and inside temps to make sure it's ideal for the birds throughout the flock.
It's quite an interesting thing to keep in mind. So when you were showing those controllers for the lights, temperature, and humidity, how many years have those been around, and what is the cost of installing and maintaining one of those systems?
So there's actually, so that was just one of them. The one that we have is we just decided with that one to go with it. There are a bunch that are very similar to those, but I would say, I couldn't tell you an exact how long they've been here. I would say at least 10 years, maybe longer. I didn't look, probably about 10 years it's been. To be more money now than it was back then. So it's probably more than it was way back then when we put them in. I think of maybe a rough estimate, I'll throw a number out there, maybe around 30 grand. So it's not a cheap thing to put in. It's quite expensive, but the flexibility you have with it and what it all monitors is really beneficial with that, for sure, for putting that system in.
That's great. My next question for you, Rachel, is how many hours of darkness do the chicks experience each day?
So when they're first arrive in the farm, we give them a bunch of light, but then they get about their first night in the barn, they get about an hour of darkness, just so that they have some time to rest. And then as they get older, for the next couple days, we slowly increase that darkness period just to help them adjust. And then around by day 5, they have 4 hours of darkness, and then that 4 hours kind of continues throughout the whole flock. So 4 hours throughout their whole flock for every 24-hour period. So they get that good resting time for them that they need.
That is something I haven't thought about before. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So in regards to the biosecurity that you were talking about, if you're a producer that have multiple barns on your property, how important is it to prevent cross-contamination, i.e. like separate clothing and boots between the barns? And what consequences are there if there is disease that come into one of the barns for your operation?
Right. So each barn we kind of call its own restricted area. So that restricted area has its own separate boots. The boots is the big one because lots of things can stick to the bottom of your boots and bring into the barn. So changing your boots is a must, and we do that per restricted area. So you have more than one barn on the farm, you have just different boots for those barns. As far as clothing goes, that varies. Some people prefer to do every single barn has their own clothing that they wear to that barn, and some people do more premise clothes that they wear into all the barns at the same time. So it kind of varies on what people prefer, but both are acceptable measures that we accept for biosecurity. As for your second question, as far as disease goes, if a disease would get into a barn, it can be really affects the birds, but not just the farm.
If you have reportable diseases that suddenly spark up on a farm, it could affect a 5-mile radius around that farm. So it could affect, more than just that farmer. It affects everyone in that area. So we do also encourage, small scale farmers. If you have a handful of chickens, if you have 100, if you have 5, right? We encourage biosecurity for everyone, because if you get on a small farm, it could affect the big guys, and if you a commercial farm gets affected, it could affect the small ones, right? So that's why we encourage biosecurity for everyone, just so everyone kind of covers each other's backs for that.
Right, and so for folks that are watching that have been to the fair and have been to the Royal Farmyard, one of the first things that we ask, or that we have available for you to do, is to actually step